She stood at the center of the stage, bathed in soft blue light, her voice clear, confident, polished. My design, my concept, my endless nights bent over wireframes and prototypes, every line now slipped effortlessly from her lips. And when the final slide clicked into place, the applause came fast and thick, thunderous. Smiling like she'd birthed the idea whole from her own brilliance, she gave a gracious nod toward me. I couldn't have done it without my team, she said, locking eyes with me, her pupils dancing with a secret. The crowd clapped louder, I clapped too. Just once, not for her but for the moment. The one I would remember later, when it would all come back to her in reverse. Behind the noise, I stood motionless, my palms open, my mouth fixed into something polite. I felt cold, not the kind of cold that trembles, a deeper cold one that silences. It settled into my bones and hardened. This was not the moment to react. She expected me to flinch, to protest, to burn. But I did none of it. I smiled back at her, a tight-lipped, paper-thin smile. Everyone said she was brilliant, a natural. They saw the spotlight and assumed she'd earned it. No one asked who lit the bulb. They didn't see the presentation I had rehearsed for weeks, the mock-ups I'd printed, the pitch script I had left in the shared folder. They didn't see me at all. She did. That was the problem. I didn't sleep that night. I watched her interview on my phone again and again, her face glowing, the host calling her visionary. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my breath shallow but steady. The next morning, I brewed coffee. Like always, I smiled at her across the conference table, congratulated her with just the right mix of restraint and respect. Then I got to work. She talked loudly in every hallway, laughing too brightly, letting every question circle back to her. Creative instincts, I nodded along. I kept my voice soft. But behind that stillness, I revisited every document, every Slack thread, every email. I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious to see just how confident a thief could get when they thought no one was watching. Turns out she hadn't deleted the old drafts. She hadn't renamed the files. A voice memo on the company drive held my voice, explaining the core feature she had claimed to have dreamt up overnight. A Google Doc, time-stamped a month earlier than her final pitch, had my annotations still floating in the margins. My digital fingerprints were everywhere. She had been sloppy, the kind of sloppy that only comes from arrogance. I gathered everything, organizing it into a timeline. I didn't breathe a word. I wanted the stage, not the satisfaction, and not just any stage, the right one. There was another meeting coming, a private pitch with the venture partners. Quiet, high stakes, no cameras, just decision makers and the truth. I waited. I let her rehearse in glass rooms, posing in front of mock slides while assistants gushed. I walked past with my coffee and said nothing. Just once, I saw her glance at me, a flash of unease, but she shrugged it off. Her confidence had calcified into blindness. The morning of the pitch, I arrived first, earlier than anyone. I plugged in the drive and queued the right file. My file. She walked in an hour later, radiating certainty, shook hands, smiled wide, adjusted her necklace in the reflection of the boardroom glass. I took my seat beside the projector. She opened her mouth to begin, but the screen blinked to life and froze. Not her slide, mine. Her brow furrowed. A moment's hesitation. She glanced toward the tech team. I stayed silent. The first slide bore my name, the date, the draft version. She tried to click ahead. It advanced to annotated mock-ups, to my voice memo, my voice, my phrasing, word for word, the pitch she had used publicly but now backed by proof that it was never hers. The smirk slipped. I didn't look at her. I looked at them, the partners watching. The story rewrite itself in real time. There were no shouts, just silence, then a few whispers, brows furrowed, eyes narrowing. The woman across the table leaned forward. "Can we pause for a moment?" she asked. My heart didn't race. I had already had my moment of rage weeks ago. Now I just watched. She tried. God, she tried. It was a collaborative effort. Ideas were shared. things evolve, but every excuse dug her deeper. The room was already cold. Now it went frigid. No one interrupted her. They just let her spiral. She turned to me once, eyes pleading, not with guilt but with desperation. I met her gaze without warmth. There was nothing left to say. When it ended, I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to accuse. I just thanked them for their time and clarified one thing. Every slide in that deck was uploaded this morning from my original folder, time-stamped, authenticated. I handed over a printed copy, signed and sealed. She didn't follow me out. She didn't show up the next day. Her desk was cleared by the end of the week. The apology email she sent was dry and cautious, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. But reputations don't bounce back from live unravelings. Mine, however, stood tall. They called me 2 weeks later. The deal was mine. No shared credits. No creative partner. Just me and the dream I had built from the ground up. Reclaimed inch by inch, I signed alone. The pen felt lighter than I expected. Like the weight I had carried for weeks had melted away. I never sent her a message, never posted a statement. I didn't need revenge speeches. The truth had spoken louder. And now, with the world watching me for once, I finally stepped into the spotlight I'd earned, not as her shadow, but as the light itself. She had that kind of smile that made people feel safe, warm, open, practiced. Most never looked beyond it, but I knew better. Not at first. I saw what everyone else did. A loyal friend, a dazzling mind, a partner in dreams and deadlines. But over time, I learned how storms don't always announce themselves with thunder. Some start with silence, curling slowly beneath polite laughter and clinking coffee cups. That's where she kept her storms, and I was foolish enough to stand in the rain, thinking it was sunshine. To everyone else, she was magnetic, the kind of person who never walked into a room she arrived. People leaned in when she spoke, echoing her thoughts as if they were their own. She had a gift for it, stealing attention without ever seeming to reach for it. And I trusted her. I trusted her with blueprints and brainstorms, with late-night doubts and half-finished sketches. I called her my co-creator, my second brain. It felt safe to hand her the keys until I realized she'd been rearranging the house behind my back. Looking back, I should have noticed the hairline fractures, the way she redirected praise with a tilt of her head, the subtle pauses before using we, the times she skipped crediting me in meetings, brushing it off with a smile and a squeeze on my shoulder. At first, I believed her when she said it was nerves or timing or miscommunication, because that's what you do with friends. You give them the benefit of the doubt, but doubt has a way of growing roots. We had built something together, or so I thought. Long nights, half-eaten takeout, brainstorming on whiteboards until the markers bled. It felt collaborative, equal, but slowly, imperceptibly, though we faded. In interviews and emails, she polished the story, angled it just enough to make it seem like she was the heartbeat behind the vision. She didn't lie. She didn't have to. Omission is a quieter betrayal, and often more dangerous. I remember the exact moment my chest cracked. A press release, clean, professional, impersonal. Her name plastered across the announcement like gold leaf. The innovation was hers. The vision was hers. No mention of me, not even in the footnotes. She stood in front of a camera, eyes gleaming, voice steady, wearing a necklace I'd gifted her when we launched the project. I watched frozen as she held my life's work like a trophy, but pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it sharpens. I didn't yell or accuse. I didn't demand an apology. I did something far more dangerous. I listened. I nodded. I hugged her at the after party, whispered how proud I was, and went home with a calm so deep it frightened even me. And then I started to watch. I retraced every step. Her interviews, her emails, her timelines. At first, it was just curiosity. Then it became a map of quiet inconsistencies. A date that didn't line up. A quote that didn't belong to her. A presentation file missing my name but oddly familiar. The more I searched, the clearer it became. She hadn't created a narrative. She'd rewritten history, but there was one thing she didn't know. In a locked folder on my drive, one she never thought to access, were the blueprints, original mock-ups, early voice memos, a detailed journal updated every night of our projects, infancy, timestamps, screenshots, my digital DNA woven through every layer of what she claimed as hers. She couldn't rewrite that. She didn't even know it existed. So I said nothing. I showed up. I clapped for her. I watched her gloat and bask and give keynote speeches with my metaphors rolling off her tongue. Every compliment she received became another thread in the web I was quietly spinning behind her back. She thought she'd won, but the real game hadn't even started, and only I knew we were playing. She thought she'd buried every trace of me beneath her glittering success story. But beneath the surface, the hunt had already begun. Quietly, methodically, while she posed for panels and toasted to victories that didn't belong to her, I was retrieving what she thought I'd lost, pieces of my work scattered across forgotten folders, shared drives, and late-night voice notes. Nothing explosive, not yet. Just fragments, lines of code, early designs, archived chat logs. All of it mine, all of it untouched, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone patient enough to see their worth. What she didn't realize was that the past doesn't vanish. It lingers in metadata, drafts, and the silent fingerprints left behind by keystrokes. The very tools she used to erase me became the ones that exposed her. A file she renamed but forgot to redate. An email forwarded in haste that still bore my name in the thread. A pitch deck she presented proudly but had once been saved on my desktop. I didn't need to accuse her. I just needed to follow the trail, and as I followed it, I couldn't help but replay it, all the long nights we spent brainstorming, sketching on whiteboards, celebrating small wins with cheap coffee and big dreams. At first, it was both of us. Then slowly, subtly, it became just her. She began rewriting the story before the first success even arrived, rewording contributions, reframing our collaboration as mentorship. Mine was the supporting role, hers the lead. I didn't see it then. Or maybe I did and chose not to believe it. Belief can be blinding. She grew louder as the applause grew stronger. Each interview was a performance, a revision. Each social media post sculpted her hero narrative. But with every boast, she grew careless. She left out dates, misquoted facts, spoke about events she hadn't been present for. Arrogance made her sloppy, and her sloppiness became the foundation of my strategy. She was building a castle with hollow bricks. So I smiled. I congratulated her, toasted her wins, all while sharpening the blade she'd handed me herself. Not out of malice but necessity. I wouldn't let her rewrite my legacy. I wouldn't let her own a story that was never hers. I watched her closely, closer than I ever had when we were still friends. Each time she gloated, she gave away more than she realized. Each word became a puzzle piece. Each smirk a signal. She thought she was winning. That's what made it so easy to stay close. I studied her patterns like moves on a chessboard. She loved predictability. Same responses, same routes, same speeches dressed in new clothes. She never planned beyond the immediate win. I did. 3 steps ahead. Checkmate already forming in the back of my mind. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. And every day, the board tilted more in my favor, but a strategy means little without the right witnesses. So I reached out quietly to people who'd been there. Old colleagues, early collaborators, journalists who remembered my name before it was edited out. I didn't feed them a story. I let them recall the truth on their own. A few details here, a forgotten screenshot there. One by one, they remembered. Each memory a thread, and with every thread, the net around her began to tighten. Not from above but from within. She still had no idea, because the one thing she never counted on was the existence of something she couldn't overwrite. Something she didn't even know I had. My ace, tucked away, encrypted, silent. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just definitive. A contract with my signature, a dated prototype, a video recording from the day the idea was born, time-stamped and clear. The story she spun unraveled with a single clip, a single click. Still, I waited, because timing is a weapon too, and some moments deserve more than truth, they deserve precision. So I didn't rush. I let her stand at her peak, let her schedule another high-profile pitch, let her call the press, let her believe the story was finally complete. She never saw the moment coming, but I had lived it 100 times before it arrived. She didn't know the moment she lost. That's the thing about people like her, they don't recognize danger when it smiles politely. But I remember it clearly. We were surrounded by people, the kind who wore applause like armor. She was glowing, drunk on praise, wrapped in a spotlight she thought she'd earned. And then she said it. One line to confident, one fact to wrong. She named the date we launched the prototype 3 months before it actually happened. 3 months before I ever gave her access. It was a tiny slip, barely noticeable. But to me, it was everything. I hadn't planned to strike that day. I was still building the final layers of the strategy, calculating, watching, tightening the circle. But arrogance always rushes the endgame. She'd been so sure of herself, so convinced I had disappeared into the shadows. That slip of the tongue opened a door she didn't even realize existed, and I stepped through without hesitation. It didn't take a scandal to start the collapse. Just a single leak, carefully placed. A screenshot anonymously sent. A file history, quietly forwarded. There were no fireworks, just a whisper that didn't match her polished story. Enough to make one person wonder. And then too, I didn't need to shout. I needed curiosity. Doubt. It spreads quietly, but once it starts, it doesn't stop. She must have sensed something. Maybe it was my silence. I'd always been quick to congratulate her, to nod, to play the part. But that day, I said nothing. Just smiled, not with bitterness, with calculation. That smile meant war, though she didn't know it yet. She still thought she was ahead, still thought silence meant defeat. But silence was how I loaded the weapon. It was subtle at first. In the next meeting, her words didn't land the same. People didn't nod, didn't clap. They hesitated just long enough for her to notice. That delay between her joke and their laughter, that wasn't timing. That was doubt taking root. She kept talking, of course, filled the silence with more bravado. But the air had changed, and doubt spreads faster than truth. One person asked her about the early design phase. Another mentioned a file that had my initials still embedded in the title. She brushed it off, said I'd helped a little, but they remembered things differently now. They went back quietly on their own, looked at the dates, the contributors. Suddenly, her version started to wobble. Still, she clung to confidence. She'd always worn it like armor, laughed off questions, threw around new buzzwords. But when the room emptied and no one was watching, I saw it. Her hands trembled, just slightly, like she was gripping something fragile and didn't know how much pressure would make it break. She didn't know I was behind it yet. That made it easier. I kept pulling the threads, exposing the lie a little more each day. A timeline that didn't match. A speech that quoted an idea she hadn't written. I didn't humiliate her, I simply revealed her. One contradiction at a time, gently but unmistakably. She saw it coming before anyone else did. Not in full, just enough to panic. She stood in front of another crowd, pitch perfect, voice unwavering. But her eyes kept moving, scanning the room, looking for the usual nods. They weren't there. People were listening differently now, watching her, not with admiration, but with evaluation. She kept smiling. That was the most fascinating part. Even when the floor started to crack beneath her, she smiled. Because that's what people like her do. They pretend even as the stage burns. She knew the cliff was coming. She just didn't know how far the drop would be, and when she finally realized I was the one undoing her story, not by force, but with patience, her mask faltered. She tried to strike back. A quiet dig in a private conversation. A rumor dropped in a shared space, but it was too late. Her tools no longer worked. The people she'd convinced were now watching both sides. They saw through her charm. They remembered me. The war isn't over. but she knows it's begun, and this time, I'm not the one standing in her shadow. She always thought she could control the narrative. For years, she twisted the truth like silk through her fingers, weaving lies that looked like accolades. And people believed her because she was careful, charming, and loud. But the one thing she never prepared for was someone who listened more than they spoke. Someone like me. The moment had been building for months, but when I unleashed the truth, I didn't announce it. I simply released it. One file, publicly, no commentary, no accusation, just the facts she never imagined I'd keep. Screenshots, original drafts, timestamps that placed me at the origin of every idea she'd claimed as her own. It was quiet, but impossible to ignore, and for once, the world was watching her not in admiration, but in judgment. Her story buckled in real time. She tried to stand tall, to deflect with practiced ease, but the file held dates that didn't lie. There was no spinning it. She had always been quick on her feet, but this time her reflexes betrayed her. The very calm she'd mocked me for became my greatest weapon. She scanned the room for someone to speak up, to defend her version, but they just stared at the proof, blinking in disbelief. Then came the laugh, nervous at first, then louder, sharper, meant to be disarming, maybe even charming. But no one joined in. The silence that followed was worse than any shout. She looked around, desperate for someone to echo her disbelief, to pretend this didn't matter. But their silence confirmed everything. Her voice, once magnetic, now sounded hollow in a room that had turned cold. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My silence wasn't weakness, it was the echo of preparation, of patience rewarded. While she stammered through explanations, I stood still, watching, listening. My restraint was louder than her denial. People turned to me not because I demanded their attention, but because I didn't. In the vacuum of her unraveling, calm became power. She hadn't seen the setup. She never suspected that every meeting, every email, every shared document had been preserved, methodically and legally. I hadn't rushed. I hadn't attacked. I documented. Quietly, meticulously. The beauty of the trap was that she walked into it herself, thinking she was the hunter. But every step she took was one I had already predicted. She tried to recover, tried to reach for those she'd charmed so easily before. But they were already gone, figuratively, then literally. Eyes that once sparkled when she spoke now turned away. Allies she'd counted on had already distanced themselves, afraid of being caught in the fallout. Her grip on influence loosened like sand slipping between fingers. Her collapse wasn't dramatic. She didn't cry or scream, but something inside her shattered all the same. It was in the way she stopped mid-sentence, her thoughts suddenly weightless. The silence around her didn't roar, but it was deafening all the same. She wasn't believed anymore, and that more than any punishment was the end. Then came the applause. Not loud, not wild, just steady, certain, and pointed. But this time, it wasn't for her. It was for me. The same room that once clapped for her triumphs now turned toward the one who'd been silent all along. The one who hadn't fought dirty or begged to be heard. I didn't smile. I didn't bow. I simply accepted the truth for what it was. Unshakable. And this time, it was on my side. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to explain how she felt. She did that all by herself. I only held up the mirror. She cracked it with her own reflection. Her world crumbled faster than anyone expected. Doors that once opened with ease slammed shut without warning. Allies vanished overnight, and the very name she had flaunted became a whispered warning. The foundation she'd built on lies and stolen trust fractured, leaving her isolated and exposed. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a steady unraveling, each broken connection, every lost opportunity echoing louder than any shout. Meanwhile, I moved, quietly, steadily, without the need for grand gestures or public displays. My rise wasn't marked by fanfare or applause, but by undeniable achievements that spoke for themselves. Recognition came from those who valued substance over spectacle. As her influence waned, my credibility solidified, growing stronger with every measured step forward. proving that true merit doesn't rely on noise. I never let passion cloud my judgment. Revenge fueled by anger burns out quickly. I chose patience and precision instead. Every move was deliberate, calculated with care, ensuring that my victory wasn't fleeting but lasting. The silence I kept was more powerful than any outburst, my calm resolve outlasting the chaos she'd left behind. In the end, cold calculation trumped fiery emotion, proving that steady strategy is the surest path to triumph. Looking back, I feel no bitterness. The betrayal remains etched deeply, but it no longer weighs on me. Instead, it stands as a lesson carved into my character, a reminder of strength found in restraint and wisdom gained through hardship. I carry it not as a burden, but as a quiet strength that shaped who I am today. Revenge was never about rage or destruction. It was an art, the subtle skill of always moving forward, even as others stumble. While she fell apart, I kept my footing, always one step ahead. The true victory lies not in retaliation, but in the calm, deliberate march toward a future defined by my own terms.